In Cool Town, music's always playing and everybody drives convertibles.
Ugh, sounds like Austin.
Mentioned that the drummer from Red Fang put you in touch with Brutal Panda, who ended up putting out your, I don't know if you want to frame it in this way, but your comeback album, To Ynfynyty. So that was 2015, and you put out another EP just after that. I guess the big news for Cherubs fans everywhere is that at the end of this week, you have another album coming out. Immaculada High is coming out to Relapse on July 26th. Tell me about the album. How would you describe the difference between this album and your previous albums?
I think in the past we have relied on our sound to kind of glue things together, and we've approached what we do from song to song, trying to create a little world each time. And some of them are more, straight down the middle Cherubs like than others, and some of them are a little bit more adventuresome. I think this record is a record where we are trying to expand our palette a little bit and try to be a little bit more, just be stronger songwriting and a little bit more adventurous. After a while, when you are something, it's you can't deny your DNA. And I think on this record, we're trying to expand and go deeper into what we may think of our DNA, what we may think as our DNA, that rather than trying to be Cherubs. A lot of times I think you can write a song and it's very, oh, this is us. Part of this sounds like Sugary from Icing, and part of this sounds like Hanukkah from Short of Popular, and part of this sounds like, a song from Heroin Man. And you put those together, and it's a Cherub song because you've used all the tools in the Cherubs toolbox to make a Cherub song. So, of course, it sounds like a Cherub song. And this record, we're trying to get away from that or expand on that a little bit, right? Turista, the first song, is a very Cherubs song. But it's also got these things that it's doing that are expanding on the Cherubs themes, right? It's the riffs So some of the riffs go past the regular the bar number that a rock riff would go, and then some of it has these little stops, and there's some attention to the dynamics that's different than what we've done before, still coming from the same place, but it's different. There are songs on here that the sense of the record as a whole, the way it flows, is similar to what we've done in the past. We try to make a record that's a little bit like a story arc, where you blast out of the gates and you define or you define a conflict, then you go through and assess the conflict, the chaos and the conflict escalates. It gets crazy. The war happens. The conflict is it's maybe like a horror story. The conflict is rectified, you think, and you think you're out of the woods and you think you're safe, and then it comes back, it rears its ugly head and has to be killed again, and then you have, resolution. That's the emotional arc of how our records tend to go. There's a sweet thing at the ending that says everything's going to be okay. There's some nasty shit in the middle where everything's not going to be okay. And so this record does that. And then in the sonic palette, it's similar to some of the other records. I read a funny review yesterday where it said like that we were amateurs in a garage. And, that's pretty awesome because we're not amateurs. And but the fact that it still feels raw like that is great. I'm glad that person felt that it felt immediate and in your face that way. I think one of the things that we would always be worried about is having something feel so digestible that you're not having to be conscious of it as you're digesting it. You want some of that in context, but you want it to be in a Cherubs context. You want the sweetness to be a Cherubs sweetness, and that is a different sweetness. It's got a lot of salt in it. So for us, this record it's a continuation, and it's also breaking some new ground that I hope enables us to stay interested and do more.
I like the way you describe your sound because I think, talking about there's a sweetness to it, but there's also some salt to it. Because when I think of the bands that are described as noise rock, whether it's Cows or Unsane or Cherubs, there is a level of discomfort to it in the way that certain musical elements are juxtaposed against each other that you wouldn't necessarily put together. So with Cherubs, I think,
right,
especially on this new album, there's elements of it that are very almost shoegazy and kind of ambient and kind of almost pretty, but they're done in this very discordant, noisy way that you never get that kind of lulling, droning sensation you get from a lot of shoegaze bands. Like it's still kind of an uncomfortable experience.
Yeah, I think I did see a review where someone was talking about these shoegazy moments, and I think they're definitely in there. I think for us, there is an undeniable. We came up listening to the same stuff everyone else did through the 80s and the 90s and the 70s, for me. And so there's hard rock. We're listening to hard rock. We're listening to Hall & Oates. We're listening to The Cars. Then all of a sudden we're listening to Glenn Branca, and we're listening to Philip Glass, and we're listening to Steve Reich, and so all of a sudden there's all this other weirdo shit happening where music is turning in on itself and expanding, and it's being affected by art outside of itself as opposed to music just listening to music, right? You start to have this feeling that art is affecting music, and that vacuum cleaners are affecting music, and pollution is affecting music, and all these things. So when I think about us, it's in our name too. We are allowing for the sweet kids and childlike people that we know we came from and are. But we are also dirty. I mean, your human body is a fucking filter of this world. And that's a filter of poisons. And that's a filter of sound. And that's a filter of whatever. And we're dirty filters that are, childlike creatures that are making this music. And that has to be reflected. So if it's shoegazy, if it's too shoegazy, that's not in the filter. There's only a bit of that in the filter, and that means other shit is not getting attended to. So we attend to the nasty id and nasty egos, and we attend to the child in ourselves, and we attend to the precious diva that's reaching up to the stars. We try to attend to all of that somewhat because that's who we are. And if there's anything that connects with people, I think that's probably it. I think that's why people who maybe don't want us to be so hard accept the hardness, because there's some sweetness in there. And the people who don't want us to be so sweet accept the sweet because there's some hardness in there. And so we are very conscious of that as we do this. I think there's a lot of people who maybe make music and they say that they don't give a shit about who's listening to it. They do it for themselves. And maybe that's an expression of true art, but that's not the way we are. We care a lot about the way it affects the audience and the way it affects the listener. And every song is built to try to engage, and the idea that you have to engage someone on these multiple levels, I mean, that's the complexity of what a human being is. And so that's how we approach the music. And I also think that the chaos and the that's the world. The chaos is the world. The nastiness and the craziness is the world. And you have to have that in there. You can't just make something that doesn't have that shit in there. You have to have it in there. It's part of our existence. So we're just mirroring that, and we do it the best we can using our dirty ass filters that we've have after being alive for 50 plus years. And I think there's people that respond to it. Like my daughter is going to be 16 this year. When you turn on an electric guitar, that's old. It doesn't matter what you do with it. For her, this music she respects it and everything, but it's kind of irrelevant to her because the second you use an old tool, it is old. So some of the, we'll be up against this idea of, are we going to make old music the rest of our lives? Possibly, but maybe we'll introduce some, younger tools here and there to try to see if we can't make something new out of it. But it's interesting to be doing this old and have a younger audience coming up, because I have no idea how it's going to be relevant to them. I don't know. And it's not my job to know, I guess.
back to the album in a second, but since you brought up your audience, who is your audience these days?
We played with Mudhoney the other day in Houston, and there were these kids up front that were like 14 years old, and it was so amazing to see 14-year-olds there because all of our audience is generally older now, right? Like you're looking out, and there's people with canes, people with that can't hardly walk. It's really funny to be playing this music to people who loved us back in the day and love us now, and who are older. It just cracks me up. When there's younger people, it's amazing, and there are younger people, and for the most part, though, we see a quite a bit older audience. So I would say our audience is, in the mid 50s down to the 30s, and then there's these kids in the 14s, 20, or 14 years old that are into this stuff. And I think it's maybe because they grew up with computers and electronic music, that maybe a big amp and a nasty guitar and an actual drum set in a room is an absolute oddity. It's like a Model T or an old car of some sort, where you're just going, holy crap, look at this thing. It's so antiquated. And maybe that's part of the appeal of it, is that it's just kind of crazy and antiquated and not on a computer, and you have to hit it, and it actually has a smell if you get really close to it. Maybe that's or maybe it's also the fact that you watch these people working. It's like watching someone shoveling coal or something. They're working and they're playing this guitar and they're sweating. That's very different than computer generated music. And so it's weird. Like I feel like our audience is older and then very young. I feel like there's nothing in the middle. Like I don't feel like in the people in their 20s and early 30s, late teens, 20s, early 30s. I don't think that's who our audience is. I think it's super younger people and then older people.
I don't go to as many shows as I used to, but when I did, I was always astounded because, I just turned 40 this year, and so I tend to be on average 15 to 20 years older than whoever usually goes to shows.
Yeah.
And the audience at the shows for the music that I mostly go to, which is metal and punk and hardcore, is late teens to mid 20s, always. And I'm the old guy at the back.
Yeah.
But I would go to these shows, and songs would come up on the PA between sets, and there would be songs from my teenage years and from my early 20s, and these kids would know every single word and every single song. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
So
I love that.
I mean, we live in this age where the entire compendium of human knowledge is available online for anybody who wants to go out and find it.
Yeah.
And some of these kids, just because of the obsessive nature of youth, they find something like Unsane, and they want to know more about Unsane, and they want to know more about noise rock, and so they want to get every Cherubs album, and by the end of the day or the end of the week, they know everything there is possibly to know about that kind of music, and
I know. It's so funny.
And then you'll see them at your shows, and they'll be buying the T-shirts, and it's funny. Like I see kids who are basically me from 20 years ago, and I don't want to tell them that because I don't want to depress them.
No, you don't, and you want them to be excited. Their excitement it gets you excited again, and it's amazing. Yeah, you don't want to, you never want to tell them that, because it's just weird, and it's weird how you can fill in your education so quickly. Like it took us forever to find out things back in the day, and because there was just no means of moving it around. You couldn't get to it quick enough.
Do you remember waiting, like the actual process of having to wait for an album, whether it was through the mail or having to drive to the record store, or it was like things took weeks to get, and now it's instantaneous.
Yeah, and it's funny because I like the idea. It's weird how it's affected the record sales business, because you're selling actual records on vinyl, and then you're selling digital downloads, right? So the physicality of the product is not as important as it used to be. It's only important as a fetish object, really. And then there's no middle ground. Like, we had some CDs printed, but apparently, quote unquote, CDs are only for Europe. And the idea that back in the day you would get that record and it was gold. It was just gold because you had to wait for it, and it was coming out and it wasn't here yet. And then when it got there, it was just like you were getting it directly from the band, right? It felt so special. And those were treasures at that point. And everything was based on the waiting time, the waiting period. And it's crazy because waiting for people who know how to do it is pretty delicious. It's a delicious thing to do. For people who don't know how to do it, it's absolutely excruciating. But when you have to wait for something and you get it, you are so much more charitable with it. You're more, the way that you listen to it, the way that you interact with it, you're way more sensitive to all the pieces of it. Whereas when you don't have to do that and you can get things so fast, you can dispel shit really quick because the next thing is just about to pop up. And that's terrible for music, because music is a thing that you have to live with it. You have to breathe with it. You have to let it wash over you. You have to allow it time to present itself, because a lot of shit that we don't build it to present itself on the first listen. We build our stuff to present itself over time. You discover things about it, and it's hard to do that in this world where you can get everything so fast. It's really hard. So I like the waiting thing. I hate waiting in lines, don't get me wrong, but damn, for music and for art, the time aspect of it is one of the things that makes it so golden.
Insects and
So I just have a few more things to ask you about this new album.
Okay.
You talked about the sweetness, and we talked about the, I guess, shoegazing element to the sound. The album was actually produced by Eric Wofford, who's worked with Explosions in the Sky. What was it like working with him?
It was great. The great thing about Eric is that he knew us back in the day. He's younger, but he was a Cherubs fan. So it was kind of cool to get to work with someone who had a tad bit of hero worship in it. He did not let that show. I think it was embarrassing for him to be a fan, and he did not want to make us feel weird. So he did not let that part of him show very much. And he was super pro. And the great thing about working with somebody that can be both pro and a fan is that he understood us. He understood what we did to him musically and artistically. So he understood. He asked us, are we being cherubs? Are we gonna be cherubs? Are we gonna do anything new? Can I think about this as you guys and think about the next cherubs thing? Or is this, there's no surprises here. And we said, yeah, it's gonna be us. It's the sonic palette is gonna be us. You know what that is. There's going to be things that I'm going to do with the guitar to make this chaos shit happen. There's going to be these time signature shit that feels a little weird and backwards. All of that shit's going to be here. And then there's songs in there too. And we will need your help servicing the song, right? So if we're playing this part and we're playing 6 times and you're getting bored, you need to tell us and we'll cut it to 3 and make a better dynamic out of what's going on. So, he knew that we wanted he knew we wanted a pro version of that rookie garage sound that I was talking about earlier. He understood that, right? So he knew that we wanted big drums in a room. We knew that we wanted to play together in a room. He knew that it was going to be claustrophobic and and uncomfortable, and then it would get sweet. And so he knew all of that, and he allowed for it in everything that he did. And then we would allow him some tether to mix things. Then we would come back in and say, well, you're prioritizing the drums too much here, right? This is more effective if the guitar is over the top here, and then vice versa. And bass, where's the bass? Right here, we want the bass to be driving this. So, it was a collaborative effort in terms of how we're fixing the songs. We go in there, things are about 85% done, some more than others, some less. And we allow for some last second weirdo shit to affect the sound, and we wanted to allow for Eric to affect the sound, and with the proviso that we would trump him and kick his ideas to the side if we didn't like them, and he was cool with that. And so the experience with him was really great, and he was very amenable to letting us pout here and be precious here, and then he would come in when he thought we needed some help in figuring out some stuff. So it went really well. I'm very pleased with it.
Yeah, he did a really great job. And there's a depth and a scope to the music that I think was maybe lacking on some of the earliest recordings.
I agree.
And rather than there's this feeling of organized chaos where it doesn't feel too rigid or too overproduced. It's just the right amount of fullness, I guess, to the sound.
I'm glad to hear that. One of the things that he did, which we hadn't done before, is he would take the vocal take, and then he would listen to the things that were obviously working, but he would leave some weirdo shit in there. So he would leave me kind of humming around or just kind of goofing off when the principal vocal was not happening. So it was really cool. Like there was some happy accidents, like some of the harmonies and stuff on Nobodies at the end. That was because he left stuff in there and had us listen to it, and it wasn't like we wanted, but it was better because it was looser and it had a humanity and a kind of a charitable feel to it. There's a couple songs like that where he left vocals kind of ghosting around in the background that I think speaks to your comment about depth. You know, it made it feel deeper and it made it feel richer because of it. And it's not overt. It's very subtle, but it's in there, and that happens a lot through there. And that's due to Eric. So that was some good shit.
And the album is coming out on Relapse, who is actually Red Fang's label.
Yeah.
How did you end up signed to Relapse?
Well, both Bob and Mike from Brutal Panda worked for Relapse. And I think it seemed like we were going to take a step up in volume in terms of sales and who we would be talking to, potential audience on this record. And it seemed like Brutal, though they did a fine job, it seemed like it might be a better situation for Relapse. So Relapse might be better for us at this point. So Bob at that point, Bob switched hats and talked to us with his Relapse hat, and then we met with Rennie over at Relapse, and he's a fan from way back, and he was super interested in doing it. And so, we kind of kept it in the family. I don't think if it would have been for Mike and Bob that we would have gone to Relapse. We perceived them as more of a metal label, but when you look at all the things that they do, they're very eclectic. And so we're happy to be in that world because we're not when you look at our album cover and our stuff against everything else, we're the one that's not black. we're the one that's not dark, and we're the one that's not dripping trees, and not that any of that's bad. It's just that stuff. It's great to have a more varied palette. So I think it's really good for Relapse too that we're on there, because we're a little different flavor than the stuff that they're coming out with. And for instance, I love the idea of possibly playing with Pig Destroyer. Pig Destroyer, that's a fucking monster band. They are nasty and big and monstrous. And we're not. I mean, we can our monster is goofy. And but the fact that we could play with them because we're on that label is pretty cool. Same thing with things like Torch and Red Fang. There's these. It's a little community that all exists together and affects one another, and that's pretty cool. And I want a Pig Destroyer T-shirt. Like anyone would want a Pig Destroyer T-shirt. And I love the dripping tree logos. I wish we had a logo like that where you could barely read Cherubs in there. I think it would be badass. So I'm excited about it, about being on that label for that reason. For the reason that they are metal and for the reason that we're not. That's great.
Maybe you can suggest to your merch company to come up with a tour T-shirt with a special edition Cherubs death metal logo with the spiky letters and all that. I
think we'll have to. I think it's a foregone conclusion. We're going to have to do that. There's no doubt.
Yeah. On the surface, Relapse is a strange choice for Cherubs, but back in the day, they were the label that brought Today's the Day to a wider audience, and Today's the Day also came from that. They don't sound anything like Cherubs, but they're also part of that AmRep noise rock.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So there is a bit of history and a bit of synchronicity. I don't know what the right word is, but it does mix.
Well, it's a kind of a legacy move. There's a little bit of a legacy play happening, which I think is really cool. That's really nice.
Yeah, and a Cherubs Torch tour would be amazing.
That's been talked about, and it came really close to happening, but there was some logistical problems with it, and it is being discussed. So know that might happen. I hate to give any hope to any shit like that, because we get so close to some of these things and then they kind of fall apart. And you don't ever see that happening from the outside, but it happens a lot from the inside. So, but just know that it's been discussed.
So, finishing up,
Yeah.
what's next for you? Do you guys have any tours or festival appearances?
Well, we're going up the middle of the United States, kind of up through Louisville and Columbus, Chicago, all that stuff, and then coming back down 2 weeks in August. Then we're trying to firm up this an October thing on the West Coast. It's super close to being announceable, and we're playing some shows in Austin. There's a show that I can't say anything about yet that we're going to play with a certain another revival band that a singer from another band is singing in it currently to replace their current singer. And I can't talk about that show, but that's supposed to happen later in the year. And then, we're mostly talking about next year at this point, where we've got one-off shows happening all over Texas just to kind of keep our fingers working. But next year we're talking about trying to go to Europe. That's when some Torch talk was happening. I don't know how that's all going to go down. There's just a lot of irons in the fire. So, but basically next year, probably June, July, and I would imagine there'd be some stuff early in the year, but it won't be us going far away because we've got a lot of work commitments here for that. Yeah, so every year we say the next year is going to be Cherubs year, and maybe next year it actually will be. But I mean, we'll have the record out, so that's going to help us. I think basically what happened is when To Ynfynyty came out, everybody probably considered that was just a last hurrah. And so I would, as a booking agent, seeing that and not seeing a record come out for a couple of years, I don't think I would have been excited to book us because it seemed like we were just like waving goodbye. But I kind of think we're going to wave goodbye for a while. I think we're going to wave goodbye on this record, and we're going to wave goodbye on the next record, and it's just going to be probably a low-level theme. So people are going to have to get used to that. Maybe we can subdue it a little bit so it's not so eye-rolly.
Do you feel intimidated by your legacy at all? Because, at this point, Cherubs is, you've got bands covering your old songs, you're considered a seminal noise rock band. Do you ever look back on that legacy, and does it affect the way that you write songs now?
I think it's our responsibility to be better, right? I think that's really all it boils down to for me, and I think us, is that we need to be better, right? We're older, so we're not going to be able to write the songs like Hanukkah or play songs like Hanukkah anymore. That shit's too fast. Our bodies are breaking and we can't do it. So we have to figure out a way to be good and be better without doing that. And so that's our responsibility. If we don't get better, we have to kind of stop. And that's the only real responsibility I feel. When I look back at Heroin Man, I think, holy shit, I cannot even believe we did that. And so it's an abstract thing to me. And I look back on in amazement, maybe like anyone else does, like a fan almost. I look back on it and go, Jesus, that we could never have done that now. And so I can only really pay attention to exactly right now. And my right now with you is to be as honest and forthcoming as possible. Then after I get off of this, my next right now is to do these dishes. And then my next right now is to go to work and try to be smart and funny. And then during all that, my right now is to take care of my daughter. And so I have all of this nowness that I just have to pay attention to. And I don't know how the legacy drives that. I only think that I have to be able to drive what we do now in a way that inspires us first and then others next. If we can't be inspired by what we do, then we are certainly not putting on our oxygen mask first before we help others with theirs, right? So it's all I can do to just concentrate on now, and so that's what I try to do.
Excellent. That's a good place to leave off. And for everyone listening, the album is Immaculada High, and it'll be out on July 26th. You guys have a Bandcamp page where people can stream it and pre-order it. And there's also going to be physical releases like CDs and vinyl as well, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I just want to thank you for this. This is awesome, and I really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll get over to y'all's neck of the woods at some point and maybe be able to play over there. It'd be awesome.
That would be amazing. Thank you so much, Kevin.
All right. Take care.